All right, Matt, with Fight Night Picks, we're in a bit of a weird spot. I know everybody else is in the sports world, of course, with, the way that the NBA, the NFL, what have you, everything's pushed back. NFL free agency still have. But in terms of the UFC, we don't really have any clarity. I know Dana White was pushing for us to have fights this weekend, the London card into the States on tribal lands. Cage Warriors has Cage Warriors 113. And with Fight Night Picks, I know a lot of you at home, you're used to watching us and getting into those picks. Let's get into it. But listen, we're going to have to switch things up in terms of what we're going to be branding as content. We're still going to have Fight Night Picks kicks. We're still going to have significant strikes. We're still going to have This Week in MMA. But I put it out there on YouTube. I said, what do you guys, the fans, want to see from us? And actually, an overwhelming majority wanted to see fighter interviews, which is something that we've done before. I know a lot of people said, hey, it's going to help grow the channel, what have you. But we've been there, we've done that, and with mixed results. So I'm going to stay away from that. If you want fighter interviews, Mike Heck, you can find him on Twitter and Instagram and YouTube, as well as our pal JHK MMA, Kumite TV. They're still pumping out great interviews, so make sure you follow those guys for that. But one of the things that was thrown out there was, hey, why don't you do smaller segments answering fan questions? Which is an awesome response because we're already doing that with some of our live content anyway. So I threw it out there. We're going to start this new segment. It's called Parry Counter. We're going to split them up into different videos, make it a playlist on YouTube. You can follow along. And like I said, I threw it out there in the community section with that question. What do you want to see us answer? First Last was somebody that asked a lot of questions, and they're great ones, and we're going to try and get into as many as we can. But the first one here is, I think Charles Oliveira and Diego Ferreira are top 6 lightweights now after their wins over Kevin Lee and Showtime Pettis respectively. Thoughts? And I understand where First Last is going with this, just because of the fact that another one of the questions was, what do you look at for rankings? Where do you go? And Fight Matrix is where they're going right now. At 5 and 6, you have Ferreira and Oliveira. So I understand it. If you look at the UFC's rankings right now, they're still not updated. They have Ferreira at 11 and Oliveira at 13. I'm sure we'll see that change in the next coming days. I'm not going to get too far into rankings, but you can find my rankings at the Hardcore Rank on Twitter, and I do those with a number of MMA journalists, super fans.
Who actually know what they're talking about? Because when you actually look into who does the UFC's rankings, a lot of them don't even cover the sport professionally. They just cover other sports, and it just so happens their publication wants them to cover MMA as well. So it's just a really good way, and it's just more of the hardcore. Exactly, it's the hardcore's ranking, so it's going to give you a little bit more in-depth analysis.
But in terms of the question, do you think that Carlos Diego Ferreira and Charles Oliveira are upper tier lightweights at this point in their career?
I think he's 50% right. I think Charles Oliveira for sure is. It's kind of wild the career trajectory that he's had. He's been in the UFC for 10 years. He's had wins. He's had losses. He's lost by submission too, which is kind of crazy when you think of just how high of a level of a grappler he is. But Charles Oliveira, I really do think, can make his way towards the title eventually. And it's one of those cases where he kind of matches up well with Khabib. I just don't know if he can beat the 3 guys ahead of him to get to Khabib in the first place. Because when you look at who he has to beat, he's either going to beat the winner of Dan Hooker, Dustin Poirier, if that fight goes through on time. Tony Ferguson, Khabib. He's probably not going to get the winner of that. Or Conor McGregor or Justin Gaethje. None of those guys are easy fights. Like, they're some of the best fighters in the world regardless of weight class. But when you look at how he matches up with Khabib, he matches up really, really well. Because when you look at his striking, he doesn't have the power Khabib has. Khabib does have pretty good power, but Khabib's kind of sloppy with his striking, and Charles Oliveira is the exact opposite. Very technical. He's got really good Muay Thai. And if the fight goes to the ground, I'm not saying Khabib wouldn't just maul him and dominate him, but it would definitely be an intriguing matchup once the fight does hit the ground, because Khabib has to get the fight there, and Oliveira has more submissions than anyone ever in the UFC. But with Carlos Diego Ferreira, he beat Anthony Pettis. Like, beating Anthony Pettis in 2020 doesn't mean that much to me. It did in 2016, it did in 2018. But after that Tony Ferguson fight, I really think that we saw kind of, this is what Anthony Pettis is now. He can give good fighters hard fights, but he's probably not going to beat that upper echelon. He's going to be able to, he'll do something flashy, he'll win a fight of the night, but he's probably not going to win the actual fight that became fight of the night. Carlos Diego Ferreira, I think, is still going to need 4 or 5 more wins to get to that title shot. It's unfortunate just because the top of the division is so logjam right now, and with all the virus going on, delaying different events, it's going to be really hard just to get to the top of the division. But I do think Charles Oliveira is much closer to getting a title shot or getting a top-tier opponent than Diego Ferreira is.
And it's interesting, too, because based on matchmaking, I mean, you look at the fact that the purpose of this video, we're going to talk about some of the dark horses in the lightweight division. That's where we're going to end up going with this, but a great question nonetheless. But you look at Diego Ferreira, and he comes just out of the gate. He continues to finish guys, pour it on, great performances, great win streak. and then beat Showtime Pettis. So all of a sudden, you get that caliber of name where, hey, you beat a former, champion in this weight class.
Pound for pound, top 3 at one point. Like, Anthony Pettis was a big deal, but that's the problem. We keep on using the word was. And I understand why their rankings, it might attribute the fact that he was champion a little bit more, but I just think you have to look at when you beat a guy, too. You can beat a guy before his prime, after his prime, in his prime. And I just feel like a lot of Anthony Pettis' more recent guys, he's not in his prime anymore. I know the Wonder Boy fight was really good, and he got that nice knockout win. But other than that, we haven't really seen Showtime, if you will, for 4 or 5 years. That's all.
And that's the thing. So you look at Diego Ferreira, he gets a big win, and then you're talking dark horses, one of the top prospects in the division, 3 months ago, Nazar Hakparas, and he fights Drew Dober. Dober pours it on him, and now you have a matchup that might seem a little weird on paper. Dober may be punching up a little bit, but Drew Dober and Diego Ferreira, that fight's already booked. But with Charles Oliveira, he moved, he was at 13, and he beat a guy that was so much higher up in the rankings that it's going to be awkward to see what the matchmaking is with him. I mean, like you said, you've got Dan Hooker and Dustin Poirier, you've got Gaethje and McGregor sitting kind of in limbo, and then you have your title fight coming up at, I'm going to say it and use air quotes, UFC 249. You have Khabib and Tony Ferguson booked up. So it doesn't really leave you with a lot of room. And those are two guys, and going back to the question, are they 5 and 6? I don't know if I'd go with that. And I know Fight Matrix it's not totally subjective. They use an algorithm, but it all depends on where they determine points should go. Yeah, that's exactly the system that they use. But if you're talking in terms of dark horses in the lightweight division, somebody that could go on a run or somebody that's already really put together a nice win streak, and they might even be top 15 fighters, but who are some of the names that you can think of?
So outside the top 15, this guy had so much hype behind him. He had a few losses, but if you look at his most recent performances, he's actually looked really good. Marcia Casey, I still think, has a future in the division. I know he's a little small at 155, but when you just look at the speed and the power and the agility that this guy has, like, you could tell he's one of those guys, it doesn't matter what sport he would play, he'd be really good at it. He's just a wicked athlete. He's got those crazy Taekwondo kicks. He's got really good power. The only weakness we've seen in his game, he's not a good wrestler at all. Jakar Close was able to beat him that way. He just kind of grinded him. He did break his foot in that fight, but still. And Nasrat Haqparast was able to pretty much dominate him. But after that, they matched him up with Joe Duffy. And a lot of people might not know Joe Duffy if you just started following the sport recently. But Joe Duffy at one point was a big deal. Like, he fought Dustin Poirier on a...
Beat Conor McGregor.
I knew you were going to say that. But he fought Dustin Poirier on a Fight Pass prelim a long time ago, and it was a really good fight. Poirier ended up winning, and after that, Joe Duffy was just never really able to fight consistently. But at one point, he was a guy that people thought could be able to get to the top of the division and actually make a lot of noise. And he lost to James Vick, came back after a long layoff, and it was a really bad matchup for Marcia Casey, because you had this young prospect, he lost 3 in a row, and he's fighting just a really good boxer who's going to kind of cut through all those kicks and make it a boxing match. And Marcia Casey put it on him that whole entire fight. And just to have a performance like that, and when you know a guy's as young as he is, and you keep on looking better performance after performance, fight after fight, you're going to make your way up into that rankings eventually. And here's the other thing people don't want to talk about. If you're exciting, you go up the rankings a lot faster than if you're boring. So if you're a guy like Marcia Casey, you only need 2-3 highlight reel wins, and you're going to be in that top 15. So he's my dark horse for out of the top 15. Yourself.
And it was a shame, too. I mean, we had Marcia Casey matched up for UFC London. That fight fell out. There's a lot of different movers and shakers, and I'm going to throw out a name there that's, still in a lot of people's minds because we just had it at UFC 248, and this is the match that I want to see happen with Charles Oliveira. It's a guy that in my rankings is ranked 1 above him. It's Beneil Dariush. Beneil Dariush is one of those guys, we talked about him. Maybe a little chinny. He was not necessarily on his way out. The Alexander Hernandez fight was really tough, but since then, he's looked amazing. In the Jakar Close fight, he looked great. We talked about it, the scrambles, the grappling, and just his striking in general. If he's able to mount that forward pressure, he gets the win, and that's really, really simple to say. But look at the fight that John McDessie had recently with Francisco Trinaldo. John McDessie on his back foot the whole fight. Have you ever seen John McDessie win a fight on his back foot? Never. It's very rare that you see somebody on their back foot able to counter-strike and finish a fight. It's not that common.
It's just like the highest of the highest level. You have to be like a Stipe Miocic or a Conor McGregor to be able to do stuff like that. And no disrespect to John McDessie. You can't expect to be able to do what those all-time greats for Sarah are able to. Dark Horse is in the top 15. I do think Dan Hooker can go on a run. It's just they gave him the worst possible matchup. If you want to match Dan Hooker up and get him towards title shot to really give that whole Anzac movement so then you can have 3 champions from either New Zealand or Australia, match him up with Justin Gaethje because he actually matches up way better with Gaethje than he does with Poirier. Gaethje's going to play that leg kicking game and he's going to stand at range with you. Dan Hooker's massive for the division. I don't know how he ever made 145, but just the range he's able to keep... he is hittable, and that's my big problem with the Poirier fight. Dustin Poirier has bricks in his hands, and he puts down pretty much everybody. But Dan Hooker, if you just look at his skills, what's he really good at? He's one of the few strikers who's amazing at fighting wrestlers, because they're going to take him down, and he knows he's just one knee away from knocking all of them out. So I do think Dan Hooker can make his way to the title, but the problem with lightweight is there's such a good king at the top of that division. Like, we're talking about Tony Ferguson, another all-time great, as potentially being the only guy who could beat Khabib Nurmagomedov. And that, I'm not even sure is going to happen. Like, you have to understand how good Khabib is. Like, I'm the biggest Dustin Poirier fan on planet Earth, and he had good moments in that fight. But when you look at what Dustin was able to do to Gaethje, to Alvarez, to Holloway, and then Khabib basically just got on him like a lead blanket, never gave him any space. That's how you have to fight a guy like Dustin. And Dan Hooker's not going to do that. But if Dan Hooker can get past Poirier, he might need one more, just depending on what Conor McGregor's doing, of course. But I could see Dan Hooker potentially at least getting a title shot. I'm not saying he's going to win it, but at this point, I don't really think we can say, oh, this guy's going to beat Khabib. It's more just, this guy could have a fun fight with Khabib. So I'm going to say either Charles Oliveira, and I know what a pick, 'cause he just won, of course, by stoppage, but still, Oliveira or Hooker. I do think those guys do have a good chance of getting out there, because we've kind of had these same 3-4 names in the top of the lightweight division. It's been the Poirier, the Ferguson, Khabib, and Conor show for a very long time, and we're going to need new names eventually, and I just feel like Father Time never loses, and eventually those guys are going to get a little bit older, and these younger guys are going to have a step over them that they didn't before, so eventually, Tony's going to lose, Dustin's going to lose, Khabib's going to lose. We just don't really know when, so it's kind of hard to predict who the dark horse is, but I'd say Oliveira or Hooker.
Couple of names in there, but really looking forward to it, Matt. I mean, we've got a weird slate coming up where fights have been canceled, fights have been rebooked, and we'll see what happens. But we really appreciate the fan questions. If you want to send them to us, I've got that out there in the community tab. You can also find us on Twitter and Instagram at Craig Allen FNP, at Matt Allen FNP. As always, drop those there, and you can find us. We're going to be here. We're still going to be here. We're going to be answering your questions, doing some different things with the channel. We really appreciate you tuning in. Matt, as always, let's get into it.